I've spent over 2 decades teaching communication. I'll be honest, it doesn't work. For most people, it doesn't work. And if you've been out there and you've tried nonviolent communication, or maybe you're a practitioner and you might be upset with me, but as long as I'm connected to those stories, I'm putting lipstick on a pig. I can have all of these wonderful ways of communicating it, but it's not my truth. And people aren't stupid.
Most couples don't have a communication problem.
They have a nervous system problem. And in this episode, we're breaking down the 3-step process that we use with our own marriage and with our clients to stop that fight from repeating.
If you've ever felt stuck in the same argument, this will show you exactly what to do differently. I'm Emily Goff, a relationship coach. I've spent years exploring how we connect to grow and heal in love.
And I'm Kelly Gardner, an embodied leadership coach and communications consultant. Love isn't theory, it's practice.
This is Love in Practice.
Let's grow this.
I love our 3-step process and how we've been able to actually narrow it down into something that just feels really, to me, it feels doable. It feels hopeful. It feels manageable, as opposed to looking at this mountain and feeling like it's going to be impossible to climb, which if you have been having a lot of conflicts, if you're in a state of relational crisis, that's a spectrum, but to one degree or another, that can feel a lot heavier to move through that and to have hope that there's something better on the other side of whatever stage you're in. And we have in particular been talking about the power struggle stage. So the first step of the methodology that we've come up with is reveal.
Reveal. And we've been revealing quite a bit.
We sure have. We've been revealing a huge amount. Yeah. And this is sort of the stage where you need to grow roots in order to grow up together. And to grow up individually as well. That is also part of the conversation. We have many discussions here about our inner children.
This is one I think that people find a lot of challenge with. And I think that oftentimes this is a rejection of therapy, the therapeutic model of, I don't want to sit around and talk about my parents. I don't want to sit around and look, those things are in the past. I want to leave them in the past. I want to move forward. Do we really need to unearth all of these things? Do we really need to dig down in that soil? Maybe some things just need to stay buried.
Yeah. And I understand that sentiment. And I do think that, again, it's a spectrum. There's all kinds of nuance in that conversation. Do we need to unearth every single thing in our childhood in order to function as adults? No, I don't actually believe that we do. Is there utility in actually digging into some of that and sharing with an open heart some of that background information with your partner that not only helps them to better be able to meet you, but it helps you to better be able to have compassion for yourself. And it allows the two of you to create deeper understanding together. That vulnerability is a necessary piece of a healthy relationship, because otherwise you don't really ever feel truly seen.
And we've talked about vulnerability before, right? And of course that can be a difficult word, particularly for men sometimes. Like, what? Why do you want me to be vulnerable? That makes no sense. Why do you want me to give you open space to hurt me? And I think that goes with both genders there. However we get to express that, we all have that experience to a certain degree. But the question is does vulnerability create the space for empathy? Right? And when you talk about the utility, right? What's the utility of unearthing some of these things? And one of the first utilities is empathy. Right? If I can see this pattern outside of me and recognize that it's a logical pattern, it actually makes sense, even though in the moment it seems to make no sense. There's a part of me that's protecting myself from something that I perceived as hurtful, as painful, and those patterns that I've created have created a safety, though oftentimes they're keeping me from the things I say that I want. They've created safety in my life. And so if I can just see that and build an awareness, then there's an opportunity for empathy. What's some of the other utility, I think, I'd ask in terms of digging down and revealing it? What do you see in that?
I think that it is really important to acknowledge that we often, we want so deeply to be seen, but we don't want to give someone else that vulnerability to see us. And then we get pissed off that they can't see us and that we don't feel seen. And then it just continues round and round and round and round. And what I will offer is that sometimes you're also going to need to go first and since we were talking in episode 6, actually, about the feminine expression and agreements in our marriage and stuff, I'll just bring this into the reveal portion for a second. Because one of the realizations that I have been deepening into, and when I share it with women, I get a lot of pushback first, and then they see it. They're like, oh, that's true. Every human has access to emotions. And I would argue that that is open and available for every single human to go deeper into. One of the unique strengths of women, speaking very generally, I don't love doing that, but one of the unique strengths of women is greater access to emotions and feelings. There's a lot of nuance around that. Some of that we unpacked in episode 6, so I won't repeat all of that. But when it comes to the sharing vulnerably and going first, Alison Armstrong is a really wonderful teacher that we've brought up before. And one of the things she talks about is complementary strengths and not competing with your partner. And you and I, interestingly, have had conversations about this, that you're like, you're not looking for another you, even though I have sometimes accused you of wanting another you and vice versa. And she used a really powerful example about Tom Brady. And she said, Tom Brady is not looking for another quarterback with his exact set of strengths. He's looking for, I'm sorry, I don't know enough about football to know whatever the position is that he would need that would be complementary. Linebacker?
Wide receiver.
Okay, wide receiver.
Yeah.
He needs a wide receiver.
Yes, he does.
Thank you,
Tight
my
end,
love.
wide receiver. He needs somebody to catch that ball.
Exactly. So that's a complementary strength. And when it comes to this whole idea of reveal and how that can sometimes, depending on the person, it can be uncomfortable for any of us. I would argue true vulnerability is inherently uncomfortable for any of us. But when women have perhaps, in a lot of instances, greater access to emotions and feelings a little bit more easily, sometimes that then needs to be an area that you take leadership in to go first. And when I bring that to women, and I have had the same internal reaction, I just want to stamp my feet and go, no, goddammit, I want you to go first. Like, why do I have to go first? But that's part of, rather than looking at that as a bad thing that I have to do, instead recognizing the enormous power that wields, that I get to step into and own fully. That's a very different vibe. And by doing so, I or whoever else is perhaps going first, gives a permission slip for the other person to reveal a little bit more.
What I hear you speaking of is emotional safety.
Yes.
Right. And I think we get a lot of conversation about, the role of the masculine to hold safety,
Yes.
And an interesting way that I think in modern culture that has translated to keeping emotional safety as well as physical safety. And so there's a question, if we're relying on the masculine to hold both of those containers, then what are we asking of the feminine? And so I think it's really interesting that you bring that up as you're talking about it. I'm like, oh, interesting. So there's an opportunity to create emotional safety. And I would argue that's still on both partners.
Absolutely. It needs to be. Like, emotional safety needs to come from both sides. One person cannot hold all of the emotional safety for the relationship. That's not what I would define as a healthy relationship. But sometimes you're going to need to take leadership to go first in each of your unique areas of strength. And in the reveal side, I would argue that in a lot of cases, it might be a little bit more accessible for the woman to find within herself, or the more feminine partner to find within herself to take leadership in that area. And by taking leadership, you're also modeling for the other person how you can end up creating connection. And that's a gift. That's
Absolutely.
a gift. It's an enormous power, it's an enormous strength, and it is a gift.
Yeah. So there's the process of the revealing, the process of creating the safety within relationship to be able to reveal. And sometimes some of these things I need to dig down and excavate, perhaps on my own,
Yes.
sometimes in relationship. But let's talk a little about what are the things that are valuable to reveal? What are the things that we're really looking for here that are most beneficial in this process of revealing?
There's so much that we go into in our work with couples around this, because the biggest part of it is what I have at times mistaken for revealing is sharing the story that I've created in my head that is full of judgments and blame, often very unconsciously. There have been times where I didn't actually think that I was judging you in sharing the story. And it took me actually a long time sometimes to really, like, it's only, I would say in the last 6 months that I have started to really, I see you, Gardner. I didn't say I get this right all the time.
No one's holding on. I'm just being silly.
Just that it's more in the last 6 months that I have really started to get underneath it. And that's what's required, is getting underneath the story, to ask yourself what's truly going on. What is the actual need that you are trying to have met? What is the truth of your heart that is waiting to be acknowledged, firstly by you? Like you can't like just throw it out, and this has to be genuine. And I promise you that your partner will be able to tell if it is not fully genuine. And even if you are not perhaps fully conscious, like you might be thinking that it's genuine, and your partner, you will notice a difference in your partner's response. Because when I share something with you, even where consciously I think that it's the thing, you do not soften, at least not nearly as much, until I get underneath that again to the true root of the thing. And then you just melt. And there is a difference. And that's not specific to you. I would argue that man, woman, whoever you're interacting with, even if you can't quite put your finger on it, there is an energetic to that level of truthfulness and that level of truth telling that is felt. And you can feel when someone is truly sharing their deepest truth.
Yeah, and I think that it comes back to this idea of if the other person can say, yeah, that feels right, then I've landed on something. If I'm the one saying, no, that's right, I'm arguing for the rightness of my thing, I probably haven't hidden it.
And to that point, I'm not trying to say that someone else better knows you and your internal experience than you know your own. It's not that. It's just the energetics of it. And sometimes your energy just needs to catch up too. We made that agreement very early on in our relationship, like when we just started dating, that sometimes the energy needs to catch up with the words. The words can be right, but sometimes the energy has not yet caught up because one or both of us was still just in a dysregulated state. Yeah. And that is also part of our process, is the regulation piece.
Absolutely. I think a large part of the reveal here also is, yes, the stories aren't helpful, right? Recognizing that what's underneath the story has real value. And oftentimes what's underneath the story is a perspective that I'm holding about myself or holding about the world that is not supporting myself or my relationship to the world. And we talk about this as, some of the stories might be, a fear of abandonment or past wounding or, this idea that I'm going to be walked all over or I'm going to be taken advantage of. All of these things that we've had to navigate in our past, they are linked to a story about ourselves or how we're not safe in this world that we're really trying to reveal. And the purpose of revealing that is to be able to put it outside of us and look at it and ask the questions. Is this true? Is this absolutely true? And who would I be if it weren't true?
Who am I with this thought? Who am I without this thought?
Exactly, right? And so if I can reveal this pattern of thinking, this pattern of being that has kept me safe in what I perceived as an unsafe world, now I have to realize that I'm actually in a safe world. At least I'm trying to create one. And I can't create an unsafe world while my system is telling me that I'm unsafe. And so I have to acknowledge these. I have to reveal what's really underneath this. There's a saying when we're arguing, we're rarely arguing about the thing that we think we're arguing about.
It's never about the dishes.
It's never about the dishes. What do the dishes stand for?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we get stuck in the argument about the dishes, then we're missing the point. We're never going to get underneath to being able to address the real root, the real core of the issue that we're actually arguing about. And they're generally pretty simple. Some simple, basic ideas. And helping ourselves to see those and see how I uniquely relate to those and how you uniquely relate to those is really beneficial to starting the process, to having the awareness in the process. And I think oftentimes that is where the process ends for a lot of people is, oh, I see it, I get it, I understand. Now I'm going to be different. And we really see it differently. That's really just the beginning of the process, an important part of the process. But if we stay here, we're not really going to create the relationship that we want.
Mm-hmm.
You ever wonder why you chose this partner and why they trigger you like no one else?
It's because on some level, we don't choose partners at random. We choose people who reflect the parts of ourselves that most need healing.
That's not a mistake, it's an invitation.
The Relational Compass helps you understand those patterns so you can respond instead of react. And finally, start moving toward connection again.
Take the free assessment at lipcouples.com/compass. Link in the notes below and find your true north in love.
The next piece of that is rewire. Mm-hmm. So great. You've uncovered all these things. You've shared all these things. You have learned how all these things in your past have impacted you. Where are you acting now? Where was that familiar to you somewhere else or at a different point in your life? Amazing. That is some heavy lifting, seriously heavy lifting. Then what are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. Because the rewiring piece is so much about the nervous system and regulation. Now, the piece that's important to note is we can give you tools, and we do. We give our people all kinds of tools on how to regulate, self-regulate, co-regulate. There's an enormous amount of somatic work that can be done around that. And even just having the awareness as to when your body is dysregulated, where is the emotion coming up for you? Where do you feel it in your body? What is the sensation? All of these things, they're so important. And then it's about, okay, how are you now going to rewire the stories that you've uncovered, everything that you have learned, the awareness that you've gained, and now you've learned how to regulate, but that regulation will only last for a very short period within yourself or within your relationship if you don't also learn how to actually rewire some of those stories and everything else so that you can be in a more regulated state more often. Now, I also feel that a lot of the tools out there, this is a fine line because some of the tools out there teach regulation to a point where I would argue it ignores the body's cues that are really important to note. So I'm all for tuning into the inner wisdom of the body. So listen, pay attention when you are feeling dysregulated. I am not telling you to ignore anything. Neither one of us are telling you to ignore that and to just push through. It's more a matter of how do we rewire it to start shifting things.
Yeah, and I think that pushing through is exactly what we don't want to do.
Exactly.
In the rewiring process. And, the first piece you mentioned there is awareness, being aware of when I'm dysregulated. And when we say dysregulated, that's, fancy talk for I ain't here. The adult, mature me just left the building. The conscious presence and awareness, the fully best version of myself took off. And what replaced it is this other version of myself that needs to protect me.
When I used to get so mad at you when you would tell me that I had left the room because I was like, God damn it, I'm right here. Like I stayed. I don't run. I pride myself on like staying in it when it gets hard. And you're like, yeah, but you're not here.
Yeah.
Like you left at this particular moment. And then I started to get it. I'm like, oh, I see it. And one time you shared with me that you feel like I have abandoned you. when that happens.
Yeah.
And that was a very vulnerable share that I really took seriously and started to look at this whole rewire thing completely differently after that.
And just for those of you out here listening, that is not a good technique, by the way, to say to your partner when they're dysregulated that you've just left the building, right? That's a sign.
I think you actually told me after the fact once I was regulated.
Oh, I'm sure there were plenty of times where I did it in the moment.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
And that's a sign that I was not regulated.
Of course.
Right? And our goal here in relationship is only one person gets to be dysregulated at one time. Right. And we'll talk about, kind of some of the ways that we try to maintain that. But what will happen is once one of us have left the room, per se, for me, it's anger. I start getting angry, and then my brain starts going off with all of this information for why I should be angry. And once that hamster wheel starts rolling, like it is like a infinite loop. It can't stop. Like all of those reasons for why I should be frustrated, they just continue to grow and to grow. And that's where I leave the building. That's where I kind of disappear, because it's the logical. I disappear through logic. This absolutely makes no freaking sense, and I need to change this. This is not okay, blah, 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 blah. And then my anger gets justified, which continues to ramp up, and then I've left the building. I've exited stage right. And so that can look very differently. For you, it's, talk about your version?
Well, I tend to default to sadness. However, with you, it can go a little bit either way. You were the first time in my life I've experienced the level of anger that I sometimes experience.
I'm going to call that growth. You know what I'm saying? Because what I've seen has been that you tend to go soft. You tend to get quiet. You tend to.
I withdraw.
You withdraw, right? I go, whoa, and you go.
Yeah, you get big and I get small. I shrink and you get larger. Yeah.
And so there are two sides of the same coin, of withdrawing emotionally to stepping out. And so
say more on that. The two sides of the same coin a little bit. I feel like we touched on this a little bit with like the grandiose and stuff conversation, but just in this example, I would love to hear you say more about how it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, anger and sadness, two sides of the same coin. One is projected outward, and one is projected inwards.
Yeah.
Essentially, I have a problem, a challenge that I'm facing that I don't know what to do with it, and probably if I dig deep underneath there's shame in it. There's anger, there's sadness, but essentially when we look at those emotions, one is projecting it outwards, one is projecting it inwards, right? And so we talked about this before, as the sadness is connecting with shame, right, and turning it inwards, and the anger with grandiosity, projecting it out towards somebody else. And both are protection mechanisms, right? As a young boy, I learned to get big, and that would keep me safe. If I were to shrink down, that was not going to create safety for me. That was going to create the opportunity for somebody to take advantage of me, somebody to hurt me. And so I learned that in order to keep myself safe when I felt unsafe, I had to get big. And even middle school me, my voice used to crack, and I literally had this, and to this day, I still use what we refer to as the wall of words. And I remember in middle school, I was in a school that was, it was on the other side of the tracks. We had a very mixed school, and there were some kids there that, I was really, honestly, very afraid of. And what I would do, my way of keeping myself safe, is if somebody started to fight with me, I'd just start getting big and and I would start acting out. And the next thing you know, there'd be a whole crowd. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to hold me back, do this, And so by the time, like he's going, come on, let's fight. And I'm like, and by the time the fight was about to happen, suddenly the whole school was there and the teachers were there, and they pulled me in the office and they're like, you can't do that. And I was like, I was about to get my butt whooped. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
better to use your words than your fists.
I'm happy that I ended up in the office, because that kid was going to kick my ass. Like, let's be honest. But that wall of words kept me safe. Yeah. Getting big, getting large, getting loud. That was my way of keeping myself safe in what I perceived was an unsafe world. That was what my nervous system does. We talk about the fight, flight, freeze, and appease. These are our autonomic nervous system taking over when we sense danger. Our lizard brain comes online and says, hey, we got to keep you safe. This whole rational, empathetic, we ain't got no time for that. You are in mortal danger. The reality is that we're not in mortal danger in our relationships, but my nervous system thinks that I am. That's what we're really talking about when we talk about rewiring the nervous system, is convincing my nervous system that I'm not in danger. And I can't tell it. I can't speak to it in that moment. When it starts firing, you can't be like, nah, dude, you're wrong. Sorry, forget about that. Right? The key is to catch it, to notice what it looks like in my body. For me, it's tension in the back of my neck and my shoulders. I start to get like this. I literally start to hunch over and feel tension, and my heartbeat starts to race, and I feel a little bit of tingling in my stomach. That's what it feels like for me, and I know what that is. And so, if given a cue, which your cue sometimes now is just stop.
That's relatively new, although it seems to work really well.
Does, right? Given a cue, stop.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, body scan. Yep. I am dysregulated. Okay. So this is where we get into, a lot of people say you need to stop and take a breath. Well, breath is important. It gives me the opportunity to reset, to reconnect, to really come back into my body, because I'm outside of it. I'm gone. And so for me, that stops. First, there's a scan of my body. Okay, I'm dysregulated. Now, can I disconnect from the story and the idea that's in the hamster wheel of the mind? What are my tools for doing that? I've got a whole set of different tools that we use with our clients, and that I use. One of mine is just getting present with what's physically here. How can I become present in this room? Forget about what I'm thinking, just what's here, what's really present, what's physically tangible that will get me back inside of my body. So we're looking at rewiring, and rewiring is incredibly helpful. And we can do practices that create greater emotional agility, give us the ability to do that more quickly. And some of the practices are just practicing actually that. It's, if you look at using our sports metaphor again, right? If you're looking at a great basketball player, if you look at Steph Curry, he's a great shooter because he shoots and 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 he shoots. It's muscle memory, right? Yeah, he's got amazing talent, but he has developed that talent by creating the muscle memory. He doesn't think about it when he does it. And so there's a lot of practices that we can do to retrain ourselves in the way that we are going to respond in those moments and make it simpler. One of the things, emotional agility, is just being able to go back and forth between very angry and very happy. Training my body to understand that both are available almost simultaneously.
And on the emotional agility front, what I would also add to that is, of the two of us, I'm the one that used to get stuck for like a lot longer, like long time sometimes, in like the sadness or whatever. That's actually changed quite a lot over the time that we've been together. And even just the other day, we were at the person, we were seeing the person that we go to, who holds us. And you and I started to get into it a little bit. And the conversation started to go off the rails. And then I think it was me, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was me who started to bring us back a bit more, just in that particular instance. It has often been you. In that particular instance, I think it was me. And we hadn't quite gotten things resolved yet. And then he stopped us and had a conversation. And he had just wanted to kind of observe us. And he's like, that's why I didn't, stop you sooner. But he said he was really actually surprised. And it reminded me how much work you and I have done around emotional agility. He was surprised that we did manage to turn it around, because it was starting to get quite heated. And then very fast, I made a decision. I came back into my heart. I'm like, no, we're talking from the head right now. I need to connect to the heart. And there's a practice that I teach women around that I practice all the time. And I reconnected to my heart, and I managed to shift things back on track.
Yeah, and I think to be clear about that, what you're really saying is I decided to go first, right? Which is I shifted me, and that created the space for us to shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's important for people to recognize is what I'm really saying is, did I regulate myself? Because again, both partners cannot be dysregulated at the same time. Nothing can happen. Absolutely nothing. But when one partner is dysregulated, the other partner can say, okay, I'm going to go first. I'm going to regulate myself. Then we have the opportunity to restart. Because two dysregulated partners yapping away at each other are getting nowhere. There's no point. We're just going to keep. Blah, 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 blah. This is where we find ourselves looping in relationships. Why are we in the same argument? Why have we been going on in this argument for 4 hours? Because we're not even in the argument. Our rational self can't show up to, our mature self cannot show up to actually find a solution, because our immature versions of ourselves that believe that we're mortally in danger are having a conversation. We might as well be out having coffee.
And this rewiring phase is so key, because you're not having relationship issues just because you have some communication difficulties. That seems to be the default response that every couple gives. It's like, well, what do you need? We just need to improve our communication.
Absolutely.
Like, I hear that from almost every single couple, and there's so much more underneath that. And yes, there are communication tools, absolutely, that can help and support, and that we teach as well. And it goes a whole lot deeper than that, because you are not physiologically or mentally or emotionally capable of changing your communication until you start addressing this shit underneath the surface.
Yeah. I want to bring up the story we were talking about earlier.
I was just thinking about that.
Because there's something that we see in that, which is our ability to make that jump, make that leap. And how often do we see ourselves in relationship where, something changes, but we go right back at it? And we were having a disagreement the other day as we were eating, and we were talking about it, and it started to get heated. I know that I was getting dysregulated for sure, and I don't know if you want to share the part that.
Sure. Well, I mean, we were talking about a moment the night before where I had been the dysregulated one, and I won't bore you with all the details, because honestly, I just think it'll take too long. I would have no problem with revealing it. Speaking of reveal, but I think that it'll go on for too long. But we were talking about that. I had come to you that morning in a much more regulated state to repair. But then things somehow started to go off the rails again a little bit, because I think there was just some misunderstanding. And you were much more dysregulated. And I held a boundary. And I said, stop, because you were starting to speak to me with anger. And I told you to stop, kindly, but firmly. Loving kindness is how Terry Real puts it.
And in that moment, that's when I kind of was like, okay.
Well, and what I followed that with was, I'm available for you to speak to me with love. I said, and if you can't access that right now, then we will revisit it later. But that's all I'm available for right now. So then there was a very long pause.
Yeah. Well, and so, I was like, challenge accepted.
That's what I love about this man.
All right. So you want me to come back with love? All right. I bet I can. Let me see how I can do this, So I took the pause, I started to regulate my nervous system, and
I could tell you were like, you were working up to it. Yeah.
And so I just started, kind of checking in with my body, checking in with physical. And I was like, man, my finger really itches. It kind of, I don't know why this thing bothers me. And at the time, it was the morning, just back from the gym, and I had my silicone gym ring on. Guys,
so you silicone, like wedding ring.
Yeah. My gym wedding ring,
right,
not my real wedding ring, because, got to lift. And so I just like, this kind of thing's kind of itchy, so I put it on the table.
My head whipped around, because I, meanwhile, had been like, I had gotten very regulated. I thought that you were regulating yourself, and then you put your fucking wedding ring on the table, and I'm like, Kelly. And you immediately saw what I was looking at.
No, it was itching my finger. I was just being with the thing, and
then we both burst out laughing. I was like, my God, we've had way worse conflicts than this.
Yeah.
So that was also a moment of comic relief that also completely shifted the entire conversation. We actually have that semi-regularly where one of us will crack a joke or just something ridiculous happens in the middle of an argument and that is helpful, but you also have to be open and available to that as well. Otherwise it ain't so funny.
The marriage is not on the table, my love. The marriage is not on the table. And so again, that just gives us an opportunity to just notice how we are able to make that shift in that moment. And one thing I'd also point out is that sometimes it can come after the moment. I have traditionally been faster at making that jump and making that adjustment in the moment, but I'm very, very slow at making that adjustment after the moment.
Painfully. And I do mean painfully, because I am the more like anxious leaning one. It feels physically painful sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the sense that I will wait for days to revisit this until you decide that you want to come back to it, and that you are generally the first person to make that shift and come back and try to create repair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got the reveal, we've got the rewire, and you were just kind of starting to touch base on the relate.
Yeah. Yeah. The relate piece, again, this is where the magic actually gets to happen. And this is where you take everything you've learned in reveal and rewire, and you are still going to continue doing those things, by the way. It does not mean that you do a bunch of that and then you're just done. That is part of the ongoing, continual relating that you now get to practice so much more skillfully and with a much more open heart. And this is where secure, deep love happens. Conflicts become much more minimal. The power struggle ceases in a lot of ways. Again, we've talked about the fact that these cycles are cycles, so you can go through another season of it, but whatever current season you're in, if that has been a struggle for you, that starts to be relieved. And you start to really remember why you fell in love with this beautiful soul in front of you. And so much of this, all of this work comes down to how you are showing up for yourself, within yourself, how you are carrying yourself, the work that you are doing on yourself. And yes, your partner gets to massively help support you with that. Again, that's part of the emotional safety. That's part of the relating stage. And they can't do it for you.
Yeah.
You still have to be willing to do that work yourself and willing to take feedback without defensiveness too, and to be able to listen for the shred of truth that might be in it. Does not mean that you have to take on everything that they're saying, but can you find potentially one little thing that's in there that you can actually work on and do something about?
Absolutely. And you touched on something there that I want to go back for a second, which is, finding that shred of truth and being able to disconnect from what's mine and what's not. And that really comes back to part of the rewiring process is creating boundaries, is getting clear on how to create a boundary that's not a wall, but to recognize where I'm being too permeable, where I'm letting something in and allowing that to affect me in a way that's not supportive. Once I get to that stage and I'm now able to communicate more effectively. Now, I've spent over 2 decades teaching communication. And, I tell this to people a lot, and a lot of my background is in what's referred to as nonviolent communication. I prefer compassionate communication. But I'll be honest, it doesn't work. For most people, it doesn't work. And if you've been out there and you've tried nonviolent communication, or maybe you're a practitioner and you might be upset with me, but the reason why it doesn't actually work, and it is a beautiful process language that helps us to break down looking at how communication is effective and how it's not effective. But what's underneath that is all the stories. And as long as I'm connected to those stories, I'm just I'm putting lipstick on a pig. I can have all of these wonderful ways of communicating it, but it's not my truth. And people aren't stupid.
Again, it's that energetic piece. You can say all the right words to me, but I can tell if I can't feel you and feel your truth and feel your heart in it.
Yeah. one of the unique things about human behavior is we're the only primate that allows our child, our baby, to be held by multiple other primates. You know that? And because of that, we have to learn at a very early age how to read intention, how to read emotion. We are amazing machines at doing that. Whether we know what's going on or not, we have a quick fire that says this is safe, this is not safe. And sometimes that can be hijacked through experiences, but we are all hardwired for recognizing whether or not this is a safe environment or this is not a safe environment, whether this intention is authentic or not. We're actually really, really good at that.
Biology,
right? It's part of the thing that we have evolved in order to stay safe. Now, because of that, we can say all the right words, but still have the wrong intention because it's masking a core story, a core judgment that is not supportive. And I can say, okay, I will use all these words that are non-judgmental to find a better way of communicating the judgment that I believe is true. And that's the hard part. The hard part is disconnecting from this judgment that I believe is true because I've had all of the evidence in my life to prove that it is true.
I'm smiling because when you have, there were a couple moments, like probably over a year ago, where you pointed that out to me, like that's what I was doing. And of course, then I got angrier, but I softened once you pointed out to me. I recognize it because I've done it so many times and I did it for so many years. And I'm like, oh, all right, you're not an asshole.
So there's the reveal, right?
Yes,
I can
there's the
see
reveal.
that part of me.
Yeah. Reflected from me into you.
I can, in the moment where, in the pause, I can go, that's right. Here I am. Do I want to make a different choice? The gauntlet has been thrown down. Do you want to come back with love? Oh yeah, I can do this. And in that space, right, this is where, it will happen over the course of a 50-year relationship, that you will just find a groove, that you will stop holding on to these stories, or you will just be, some people will find this groove. Others will stay so rooted in their core negative beliefs about their partner that there's nothing that person can ever do that will ever help another person believe their change. And that's probably one of the greatest fears that we have in relationship, is that this core negative image. When I say that, what I'm saying is each of us have this belief that there's something about my partner, and it generally starts with something very simple. And as it progresses over time, example I like to use is I don't take out the trash, right?
This isn't true in our relationship.
Yeah, but let's say I don't take out the trash, right? And the first time I don't take out the trash, it's like, hey, he forgot to take out the trash. The second time I don't take out the trash, it's like he's ignoring the trash. The third time, fourth, fifth time, it's like he never takes out the trash. That goes from he never takes out the trash to actually he's a really sloppy person. Now, once I start to develop these images of my person that is based off of observable fact, right? I saw this happen. It happened once, it happened twice, it happened 3 times. Now I start to create a story around that where not only did it happen, but they are this kind of person. Once they become this kind of person, then I will begin to see evidence everywhere I look that will support the idea that they are this kind of person. That's a difficult place to be in.
And it certainly doesn't feel good. Honestly, for either one of you. Like, let's be real. It doesn't feel good for the person who's holding that belief, because then they are unsatisfied in the relationship, and they're not going to be able to find ways to be happy with the person that they're with. And the person on the receiving end of that feels that, whether it is said or not. And at some point, it usually is said out loud. But even if it isn't, you can feel that. There's not a lot of space for connection in there.
Yeah. And in that dysregulated moment, it will come in like a knife.
Oh, it sure will.
Like a sharp knife.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so part of noticing that dysregulation is being able to recognize, because this is not only a story, there's evidence. I have evidence. I have receipts for why this person is this way. And here they are doing it again. And my dysregulated self wants my pound of flesh. So how do we get to the point where we can actually have real communication? We can develop real tools that help me see that this is not who they are. This might be something that happened or something that they did, but I'm also complicit in that because I allowed it to happen. I didn't have any real communication around it. And what oftentimes tries to pass off as real communication is just a derogatory judgment about another person. You know, I told him he was messy. How can he not get it? How can somebody live in this kind of filth and not know it? I don't even need to say this. It's ridiculous that I would need to say this. How can he not know?
It's the of course.
It's the of course, right? The reality is he came from a different system. He came from a different system where that wasn't necessarily a thing that a person needs to, for whatever reason, it worked. For whatever reason, it worked. Now, I'm judging him from the system that I come from. From the system that I come, that does not work, and that is not acceptable. But have I effectively communicated that? Have I been able to say, hey, what's going on there? Curiosity, number one. Am I able to say, hey, I noticed that you don't really take the trash out when it gets full. Is there a reason for that?
And I love that you're bringing this up around curiosity, because I have a whole framework around this. And the first part of it, this 4C framework, is curiosity. The second part of it is compassion. And we've already been talking about that throughout, you know, the revealing, the rewiring, like all of this gives an opportunity for compassion. Curiosity and compassion also generally require a lot of courage. Requires a lot of courage to not only potentially go first and to reveal your own heart and everything else, but it can take a lot of courage to meet your partner in curiosity and compassion, to see them, to allow yourself to be seen, and to have the courage to trust that there is growth on the other side of this.
I love that you said courage, because courage can only exist where there's vulnerability.
Yes, exactly.
It's not really courage if I wasn't risking something.
And that is what I meant earlier too, when I said like the inherent sort of risk of vulnerability is you're putting it on the table. You don't know how it's going to go. You can't guarantee an outcome. You're letting the chips fall, and they might fall somewhere you don't want them to fall, where the other person could reject you. They could laugh at you. They could do the thing to you that is the stuff of your nightmares, or they could actually meet you in it. And you don't know until you try. And the belief that I always operate from is inherently connection driven, which is the fourth C. So it's curiosity, compassion, courage, which leads to connection. Also relating, you know, and I'm not someone who wants to live with regrets. And that's why even in my most dysregulated states, where I'm coming from, places of fear and everything else that can come up, and I'm perhaps not exercising any of the things I just talked about. Once I have regulated myself, I go back in, I come back in, because I am unwilling to allow fear to win. To me, love, I'm always going to let love win.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's this curious space of how do I really have these effective conversations that lead us to where we want to go?
Because we've thrown a lot at you, and it also, I still feel like we haven't, and this is also leading into the rest of this season, which is going to be a bit more tangible tools and stuff as well that we are going to share. We're not the people who just, I know we talk a lot, but we're not people to only talk and not offer tangible things. That is a huge value for both of us. So you are going to be getting more tangible tools over time, but we kind of have to drip it out, because they can sound easy in theory. They're not.
Yeah.
Like, to actually put them into practice takes time, takes effort, love in practice. And that's why we have been easing you into this throughout the first few episodes. Yeah,
and the practice is, healthy relating, and it is a journey to get to that place. But the real skills seem really simple. How to engage with my partner, to listen really authentically to what it is that they want, to be able to speak when I have something that's present for me, and how to speak in a way that's going to become effective, because so many of us have gotten to the point where like, oh, I'm not going to say anything because it's not going to go well. Or if I do say this thing, it's only going to make things worse. So we're building resentments. Those resentments build over time. And so a lot of this just comes down to, what's the true foundation that we want to build in a relationship that's going to get us the distance.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes trust is a choice. Yes, emotional safety is required. And of course, trust is going to thrive more where there's emotional safety. But sometimes it's a chicken and egg conversation, because what you're talking about, to me, you have to choose the trust to not hang on to the belief that, well, I'm not going to bring this to my partner because it's not going to go well.
Yeah. And the true foundation of every relationship is trust. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not really willing to trust my partner, what the hell am I doing here? And
to me, that also demonstrates that you aren't trusting yourself to hold yourself through a conversation with your partner that might not go well. Mm-hmm. Like, let's get underneath that even further, mm-hmm. right? It's like, if you don't trust them, if your partner's a mirror and you don't trust your partner, where is that reflecting where you are not actually trusting yourself? Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is my leaning into conflict at all times is just a sign that I trust myself and I trust you, is what you're saying.
Actually, it is. Mm-hmm. It is. Mm. Yeah.
So maybe I'm not difficult after all. You hear that, guys? You hear that? Maybe I'm not that difficult.
If today's conversation brought up something for you, maybe you saw your own relationship and what we shared, that's not a coincidence.
The truth is, every relationship has its own map. But most of us are trying to navigate without knowing where we really are.
That's why we built the Relational Compass, to help you understand your direction in love. It reveals the patterns that cause conflict and the strengths that bring you back to connection.
It's based on years of coaching and real relationship work, including our own. And it's designed to give you insight, not judgment.
You can take it free at lipcouples.com/compass. It only takes about 5 minutes, and it might completely change how you see yourself and your partner.
Because the truth is, you don't need a new partner, you just need a new compass.
And a little practice.
Oh yeah. As always, that's what love and practice is all about.